The first thing she heard was water dripping. Slow, steady, like a clock counting down something she couldn't see. The room smelled like rust and salt. There was a single light bulb hanging from a chain above her, swinging just enough to make the shadows move. The floor was concrete, cracked, stained with things she didn't want to think about. Lena Moreau was sitting on that floor, with her back against a metal wall. Her arms wrapped tight around a 2-year-old boy named Nico. She was 8 months pregnant. Her forearm was bleeding, and the man sitting across from her in a folding chair was smiling like they were old friends catching up over coffee. He leaned forward. His name was Salvatore Vega, and he ran every dirty operation from the Bronx to Newark. He looked at her belly, then at her face, and said, "Your father died in a place just like this. Same kind of dark, same kind of cold." Funny how history rhymes. Lena didn't know what he meant. Not yet. But she held Nico tighter and started whispering a story to him. Something about a bunny and a magic garden, anything to keep him from crying. Because she understood one thing clearly. If this man saw weakness, he'd use it. Gunshots echoed from somewhere in the building. Nico flinched. Lena covered his ears and kept whispering. 9 months earlier, this woman had been waiting tables at a diner in Bridgeport, Connecticut, trying to figure out how to keep her dying grandmother alive. She had $47 in her bank account and no idea that the job she was about to take would put her inside the home of the most dangerous family on the East Coast, the same family that murdered her father 20 years ago. She didn't know any of that. She didn't know that within 6 weeks of walking through those gates, she'd be carrying the head of that family's child. And she didn't know that the baby growing inside her was about to start a war 2 decades in the making. This is the story of how a girl with nothing walked into a house full of secrets and became the one thing that could either save that family or destroy it. 9 months before that warehouse, Lena Moreau was sitting in a hospital room in Bridgeport, holding the hand of the only person in the world who loved her. Nana Rose had been in a coma for 6 months. A stroke took her down one Tuesday afternoon while she was folding laundry, and she hadn't opened her eyes since. The machines keeping her alive cost $25,000 a month, and Lena was making $11 an hour plus tips at a diner called Sal's on the Post Road. She visited every single day. She'd sit in that plastic chair, hold Rose's hand, and talk to her like she could hear every word. She'd tell her about the weather, about the rude customers, about the neighbor's dog that kept getting into the trash. Normal things, alive things. Because if she stopped talking, she'd have to sit in the silence, and the silence was where the math lived, the math that said no matter how many shifts she picked up, she was never going to close a $50,000 gap on a waitress salary. That afternoon, a woman from the hospital's billing department came in with a clipboard and a face that said she'd done this 100 times before. She set a piece of paper on the table next to Lena. Final notice: pay or they discontinue care. That was the word they used. Discontinue. Like Nana Rose was a magazine subscription. Lena didn't cry. She'd gone past crying about 2 months ago. She folded the paper, put it in her bag, kissed Nana Rose's forehead, and walked out. The next day at work, she noticed a card on the bulletin board near the register. Cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind regular people don't buy. It read, "Live-in nanny needed, private family, $9,000, month, immediate start, discretion required, no name. Just a phone number." Her coworker Maria told her not to call. She said discretion required was code for rich people with ugly problems, and that Lena was too nice for whatever was behind that number. Lena looked at the card, looked at her phone and said, "For $9,000 a month, I don't even have a name." She called that night. 3 days later, a black SUV picked her up from a gas station parking lot. Nobody told her who she was going to work for. Nobody told her where they were going. They drove for 30 minutes through Connecticut back roads in complete silence until they turned onto a private drive lined with old oak trees. And at the end of it stood a house that looked like it belonged in a movie about people who never worried about money. The Castellano estate. Iron gates. Cameras on every wall. A driveway so long it took a full minute to drive from the gate to the front door. A man named Eddie Conti met her on the steps. He was built like a shipping container and just as friendly. He patted her down without asking, checked her phone, took it, and said, "You'll get it back when you leave. If you leave." Inside, the house was beautiful and cold. Marble floors, fresh flowers on every surface, not a single family photograph anywhere. Staff moved through the hallways like ghosts, heads down, mouths shut. Nobody looked at Lena, nobody welcomed her. But Lena heard something that made her stop. Crying. A child. Somewhere upstairs, crying the way children cry when they've given up on anyone coming, that exhausted, hiccuping, running out of steam cry that means they've been at it for a while. She looked at Eddie. He didn't react. She looked at the staircase. The crying kept going. Lena walked upstairs without permission. She found a 2-year-old boy sitting on the floor of an empty hallway outside a locked door, face red, tears everywhere, a sippy cup tipped over beside him. No staff, no parent. Nobody. She sat down on the floor next to him. Not above him, next to him. She picked up the sippy cup, pretended to take a sip, and said, "Oh, this is good. Is this yours?" "Can I have some more?" The boy stared at her. The crying slowed. He reached for the cup. She handed it to him. He took a sip and gave her one of those tiny, shaky, post-cry smiles that would break anyone's heart. She picked him up. He melted into her shoulder like he'd been waiting for someone to do that his entire short life. She started humming. From the top of the next staircase, a man in a dark suit had stopped mid-phone call to watch. Dominic Castellano, head of the Castellano crime family. The most dangerous man on the eastern seaboard, according to people who kept track of those things. He watched this stranger hold his son, and his son stopped crying for the first time all day. He said 2 words to Eddie: "She stays." That was how Lena Moreau got hired. No interview, no background check, no questions. A crying child, and 2 words from a man she'd never met. The next morning, she met Vivian Drake. Vivian was Dominic's fiancée, and she was the kind of beautiful that came with a price tag. Designer robe, designer coffee, designer attitude. She walked into Lena's small staff room without knocking and looked at her like she was something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "You are the help," Vivian said. "You don't speak to Dominic unless spoken to. You don't eat at our table. You don't use the main staircase. You exist for that child and nothing else. If you're smart, you'll be invisible." She looked at Lena's shoes, her clothes, her lack of jewelry. "Where did they find you? A shelter?" "A diner," Lena said. "Close enough." Vivian left. Lena sat on the edge of the bed and didn't react. She'd been treated like this before. She'd survive it again. All she needed was $9,000 a month, and for everyone in this house to leave her alone long enough to earn it. Later that day, the head housekeeper, Clara, found Lena in the kitchen trying to figure out Nico's meal schedule. Clara was in her 60s, had worked in that house for 30 years, and had the kind of face that had seen everything and decided to say nothing about most of it. 3 rules, Clara said. Don't ask about the family business. Don't go into the East Wing after dark. And don't make the mistake of thinking anyone in this house is your friend. She handed Lena a handwritten schedule and walked away. Lena looked at it. It was detailed, careful, clearly made by someone who actually paid attention to what a 2-year-old needed. Clara's handwriting. So at least one person in this house cared about the boy? Even if she'd never admit it. What Lena couldn't know, was that accepting this job had placed her inside the home of the family that destroyed hers. The man who hired her with 2 words was the son of the man who ordered her father's murder 20 years ago. And before the year was out, every secret in that house would come for her. Over the next few weeks, Lena did exactly what she was told. She was invisible. She stayed out of the way. She ate alone. She used the back staircase. And she poured every ounce of herself into taking care of Nico. And Nico responded the way children do when someone finally shows up for them completely, immediately, with everything he had. She was the first person he reached for in the morning. He followed her around the house like a shadow. When she read to him at night, he'd fall asleep with his hand wrapped around her finger, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. The staff noticed. Clara noticed. Even Eddie noticed, though he'd never say anything about it. But the person who noticed most was Dominic. He'd find reasons to walk past the nursery. He'd stop in the hallway when he heard her humming. One afternoon, he stood in the doorway and watched Lena teach Nico how to stack blocks. And when the tower fell and Nico laughed, something shifted in Dominic's face, something that looked almost like grief. Because his son was happy, and it had taken a stranger to make it happen. One night, Nico was falling asleep in Lena's arms, and he mumbled something. She leaned closer. He said, "Mama." Lena's whole body went still. Her eyes filled. She didn't correct him. She just held him tighter and kept rocking. Dominic was in the hallway. He heard it. He stood there for a long moment, face unreadable, and then walked away without a sound. One night, Lena couldn't sleep and wandered into the east wing, Clara's forbidden zone. A door was ajar. Inside was a study, dark wood, leather chairs, and a wall covered in framed photographs. Old photographs, men in suits shaking hands, formal dinners, celebrations. One photo caught her eye. A group shot. She leaned in close, and something about one of the faces made her stomach tighten, though she couldn't say why. It was like looking at someone she'd met in a dream, familiar, but unreachable. She was looking at her own father, Alain Devereaux, standing 3 men to the left of Don Castellano Sr. at a dinner held 6 months before his murder. The photo was 21 years old. Lena had never seen a picture of her father in her life, and she was standing 3 feet from one without knowing it. A noise in the hallway made her jump. She slipped out and ran straight into Eddie. "You're in the wrong part of the house," he said. "I got lost. Don't get lost again." His voice wasn't threatening. It was careful, almost protective. He walked her back to her room and at the door said, "The kid likes you. That's rare around here. Don't give anyone a reason to take that away." While Lena was learning the rhythms of the Castellano house, the house's enemies were learning hers. Salvatore Vega, the rival boss from the Bronx, had people everywhere inside the estate's supply chain, inside the local police, and now, inside Dominic's circle. He called Marco Castellano, Dominic's younger brother, late one night. "Your brother's got a new girl in the house," Vega said. "Pretty thing. A nanny." "What's her name?" Marco went quiet. "How do you know about that?" "I know about everything in that house, Marco. That's what your brother should be worried about, but he's not. He's busy playing general while the real threat is sleeping 3 doors down from his son." The line went dead. Marco stood in the cold outside a nightclub, confused and intrigued, already calculating how to turn this into something useful for himself. Because that was Marco's gift, not loyalty, not strategy, not courage. Marco's gift was resentment, and he'd spent his entire life sharpening it into a weapon. Dominic got the empire. Dominic got the respect. Marco got a monthly allowance and a title that meant nothing. Every day he woke up in his brother's shadow, and every day the shadow got darker. But Vega's phone call told him something valuable. There was a card to play that nobody else knew about. He just had to figure out what it was. If you're watching this right now and you already want to know what happens next, do me a favor, tap that subscribe button and hit the bell. This story is about to get much darker, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. 3 weeks later, the Castellano estate was transformed. Florists, caterers, security personnel swarming every corner. It was the annual memorial for Don Castellano Sr., part tribute, part power display, the kind of event where half the guests were judges and the other half were the people who paid for their campaigns. Lena was told to stay upstairs with Nico. Clara brought her a tray of food and gave her one instruction: no matter what you hear tonight, you stay in this room. This family celebrates the way other people go to war. Downstairs, 200 people in black tie filled the grand hall. Politicians, bankers, fixers, and the kind of men whose real business never appeared on any tax return. Dominic moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who was born into rooms like this, shaking hands, reading the room, never letting anyone see what he was thinking. Marco was there too. He was already 4 drinks in by the time the speeches started. And every toast to his dead father felt like a toast to the brother who'd inherited everything Marco believed should have been his. Nobody noticed the man in the corner nursing a drink alone, watching Dominic carefully. He made brief eye contact with Marco across the room and raised his glass. one of Vega's people. Planted. Waiting. Upstairs, Lena put Nico to bed. She read him a story about a rabbit and a garden. He fell asleep holding her finger. She tucked him in, turned on his nightlight, and stepped into the hallway to get water from the upstairs kitchen. The hallway was empty. Every staff member was downstairs. The music from the party was muffled, like it was coming from underwater. Marco was standing at the other end of the corridor. He'd been drinking for hours. His tie was loose. His eyes had that glassy, dangerous look that comes right before a man stops pretending to be civilized. "The nanny," he said. "I've been watching you. The way you walk through this house, like you belong here. You don't." Lena tried to walk past him. He stepped in front of her. She moved the other way. He blocked her again. "Excuse me," she said. "See, that's what I mean. Excuse me, like you're someone who gets to make requests." He grabbed her arm, hard. She pulled. He slammed her against the wall with his other hand. His face was inches from hers, and she could smell the bourbon and the entitlement and the years of bitterness that had been building behind those eyes. She fought. She pushed, scratched, tried to scream. He clamped his hand over her mouth. "Go ahead," he whispered. "Scream. And I'll make sure your grandmother's machines get unplugged by morning. You think I can't?" "I know exactly which hospital. Room 412. The one with the view of the parking lot." Lena stopped fighting. Not because she gave up, but because he'd just proven he could reach the only person she loved. He knew the room number. This wasn't a bluff, but she didn't break. She went still, looked him dead in the eye, and said in a voice so steady it surprised both of them, "If you do this, I will wait. I am very patient. And one day when you've forgotten about tonight, I will make sure your brother finds out exactly what kind of man you are." Something flickered behind Marco's eyes. Not guilt men like Marco don't feel guilt. It was calculation. He was weighing the cost. And after a long, suffocating moment, he released her, slowly, making sure she understood it was his choice, not hers. "Get out of my sight." Lena walked away. She didn't run. She walked. She made it to the nearest bathroom, locked the door, and slid to the floor, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She sat there for 20 minutes. She didn't cry. She was too scared to cry. She was thinking. If she reported Marco, it was her word against a Castellano. If she ran, Nana Rose would die. If she stayed silent, she could survive. She chose silence. At 23 years old, Lena Moreau learned the lesson that breaks most people. Sometimes, surviving means swallowing the thing that's destroying you. While Lena sat on that bathroom floor, something was happening downstairs that would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. Dominic Castellano took a drink from a server he didn't recognize. One sip, then another. Within minutes, the room started tilting. His words blurred. His legs went soft. The drug was fast and targeted, not meant to kill, meant to humiliate. If the head of the Castellano family collapsed at his own father's memorial in front of 200 power brokers, it would be the beginning of the end. Someone at that party wanted Dominic to fall, and they were watching from across the room to make sure it happened. Eddie spotted it first. He grabbed Dominic's arm. "Boss, talk to me." But Dominic, stubborn even while being poisoned, pulled away. "I'm fine. I need air." He made it to the staircase and climbed before Eddie could follow, then collapsed in the upstairs hallway. The same hallway where Lena had been attacked less than an hour earlier. Lena heard the thud. She opened the bathroom door and found him on the floor, face down, shirt soaked in sweat, barely conscious. She didn't know he'd been drugged. She thought he was sick or dangerously drunk. What she knew was that she couldn't leave him in the hallway where anyone could find him, and in this house, she didn't know who was safe. She dragged him to a guest room. He was twice her size. It took everything she had. She got him onto the bed, and he reached for her hand, mumbling. He said a name, Vivian's name. He thought she was someone else. What happened next was not a love scene. It was not a romance. It was two people in crisis, one drugged beyond recognition, one still shaking from an assault, and neither of them was in control of what was happening. Neither chose it clearly. Neither would remember it clearly, but one of them would carry the consequence for the next 9 months. When morning came, Dominic was unconscious. Lena woke beside him, and for one confused second, she didn't remember. Then she did. She was out of that room before he opened his eyes, and she never said a word about it to anyone. 2 weeks later, Lena missed her period. 3 weeks later, she took a test in a gas station bathroom. The second line appeared before she'd even set it down. 4 weeks later, she sat in Nico's nursery at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. She assumed the worst. The only explanation she had was Marco. The night with Dominic was buried under so much trauma that it barely registered as a separate event. It was all one nightmare, and Marco was the face of it. Before she could make a decision, Marco found the pregnancy test in the trash. He cornered her in the laundry room, and this time he didn't need to touch her. He just smiled. Well, congratulations. Here's how this works. You say nothing to anyone, ever. If Dominic asks, you got pregnant by some boyfriend back in Bridgeport. And if you even think about pointing a finger at me, I'll say you threw yourself at me at the gala. Who do you think my brother will believe, his blood, or the hired help? So Lena stayed silent. She hid the morning sickness by waking up at 5 and being sick before anyone else was awake. She wore baggy clothes. She flinched every time Marco walked into a room. And she held Nico at night like he was the only life raft in an ocean that kept getting deeper. One evening, she was reading Nico a bedtime story when Marco appeared in the nursery doorway. He didn't come in. He just leaned against the frame, looked at her growing belly, and said, "You're getting bigger. People are going to notice. When they do, remember who decides what the answers are." He left. Nico patted Lena's face with his small hand and said, "Okay?" "Okay, Lena? I'm okay, baby," she whispered. "I'm okay." She wasn't. For 7 months, Lena Moreau believed she was carrying her attacker's child. She was wrong. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't set her free. It uncovered something that had been buried for 20 years, something far, far worse. Vivian Drake had many talents, but her greatest was cruelty disguised as authority. She noticed Lena's changing body before anyone else. She didn't tell Dominic, not yet. She saved that as ammunition. Instead, she made Lena's life a masterclass in humiliation. She assigned Lena to clean rooms that didn't need cleaning. She told the kitchen staff not to save food for Lena after her shifts. She locked Lena out of the house during a rainstorm when Lena took Nico to the garden. She inspected Lena's room and found a small stuffed rabbit Lena had bought Nico with her own money. She threw it in the trash in front of 3 staff members and said, "You bought a gift for my fiancé's child without permission? With your little diner money? How touching." Nobody said a word. Not the staff, not Clara, not anyone. That was the culture of this house. Silence was survival, and everyone had learned it. But the next morning, Clara left the stuffed rabbit outside Lena's door with a note. "Keep it in your drawer." Not where she can see it. It was the smallest act of defiance, but to Lena, it was the first sign that someone in this house could still see her as human. Then came the day that changed everything. Nico was eating lunch and spilled juice on the floor. Vivian, already furious about something else, snapped. She grabbed the boy's arm and shoved him off the chair. He hit the floor hard and screamed. Lena was across the room before anyone could blink. She scooped Nico up and put herself between him and Vivian, a wall of bone and skin and the kind of protective rage that doesn't need to be loud to be terrifying. Vivian, enraged at being challenged by the help, slapped Lena across the face. Hard enough to leave a handprint. Lena didn't hit back. She didn't step away. She stood there holding a crying child, her cheek burning red, and looked Vivian dead in the eyes. Behind them, in the doorway, stood Dominic. He'd seen everything. His face was perfectly still, the kind of calm that wasn't calm at all. It was the silence before something detonates. Vivian. "My office, now." 2 words, Quiet, final. Vivian went white, but Dominic didn't confront her about the slap, not immediately. Because Dominic Castellano never reacted, he calculated. He'd been running a test for weeks. He'd leaked a fake story through his inner circle that the Castellano empire was bankrupt, debts called in, fortune gone. He wanted to see who would run. Vivian ran in 48 hours. She moved $2 million from joint accounts into a trust under her maiden name. She called her father's lawyers 11 times. She booked a one-way flight to Milan for one. She didn't book a seat for Nico. Eddie laid the evidence on Dominic's desk. Bank records, phone logs, flight confirmation. She moved the money in 2 days, boss. Called 3 lawyers and a real estate agent. And the flight to Milan? 1 ticket. She wasn't taking your son. That last part landed like a hammer. Vivienne wasn't just disloyal. She was willing to abandon a 2-year-old boy without looking back. But there was something else Dominic needed to see. Something that had been eating at him since the gala. He'd heard whispers. Staff saw Marco upstairs that night. Marco had a scratched arm he couldn't explain. Pull the security footage from gala night, Dominic told Eddie. Every camera, every angle. What happened next is the moment this story splits in half. If you're still here, drop a comment and tell me what you think is on that footage. Because I promise you, it's not what you're expecting. Dominic and Eddie sat in the security room. Multiple screens, multiple angles. Camera 1, the upstairs hallway. Marco cornering Lena. The grab, the struggle. Lena scratching, fighting, breaking free. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard Eddie could hear it. Camera 2, 40 minutes later. A different angle, same floor, and this is where the ground fell away. Because on that screen, stumbling through the hallway, drugged and barely upright, was Dominic himself. He fell. Lena came out of the bathroom, found him, and helped him up. She walked him to a guest room. The door closed. It didn't open again until morning. Dominic stared at the timestamp. He did the math. 7 months ago. The room was silent for a long time. She's 7 months pregnant, he said. Yes, Eddie said. And she thinks it's Marco's. Based on what happened? Yes. That's the only conclusion she could reach. Dominic put his hands on the desk and lowered his head. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. She's been carrying my child for 7 months. In my house. Being humiliated by my fiancé. Terrorized by my brother. And she believed that the baby was his. She's been living in that silence because she thought no one would believe her. In my house, Eddie. Under my roof. He looked up. His eyes were wet. In 20 years, Eddie had seen Dominic cry exactly once at his father's funeral. This was the second time. What have I let happen in my own house? Dominic didn't wait. Within 24 hours, the Castellano estate underwent a revolution. First, Vivian. He called her into his office and laid everything out: the money, the lawyers, the solo flight, the surveillance of her hitting Nico and slapping Lena, and the evidence that her father had been laundering money through Castellano businesses for 3 years. She screamed. She threatened. She begged. Dominic was stone. You have 1 hour. Take nothing that isn't yours, which means you leave with almost nothing. Vivienne was gone by nightfall. She didn't say goodbye to Nico. She never even asked about him. Then Marco. Dominic played the footage. Every second of it. Marco watched himself on screen and went white. You cornered a woman half your size, Dominic said. You threatened to kill her grandmother. You let her believe for 7 months that she was carrying your child, and you used that lie to keep her silent. In my house. Dom, listen, if you were anyone else, you'd be in the ground already. But you're my brother, so you're going to leave tonight. You're taking nothing. And you're not coming back until I decide whether I can look at you without wanting to break every bone in your face. Marco left. But the look in his eyes as he walked out that door told everyone who was watching. This was not over. He was not the kind of man who accepted exile. He was the kind who burned things down on his way out. Then came the scene that mattered more than any of it. Evening. The house was quiet for the first time in months. Lena was in Nico's room, reading to him, same as every night. She didn't know Vivian was gone. She didn't know about the footage. She'd been surviving on autopilot for 7 months. Dominic appeared in the doorway. She flinched. She always flinched. Now, when someone appeared without warning, he noticed. He hated that he noticed. "Can I sit down?" he asked. She blinked. He'd never asked her permission for anything. He sat on the floor across from her, at her level, the exact same way she'd sat with Nico on that first day. "I saw the footage from the gala," he said. "I know what my brother did to you. I know what happened after. And I know that the child you're carrying is mine." Everything stopped. Lena's face went through shock, disbelief, confusion, and then something deeper, something that looked like the moment when a dam starts to crack from the inside. "What?" she whispered. He told her about the drugged drink, the footage, the timeline. He told her that for 7 months, she'd been carrying a truth that was the opposite of what she believed, and she'd been suffering for nothing. And then Lena broke. It didn't start as crying. It started as a tremor in her hands, then her shoulders, then her whole body. 7 months of silence, 7 months of shame, 7 months of believing she was trapped inside the worst thing that had ever happened to her. All of it shattered at once. She covered her mouth to muffle the sound, because even in her worst moment, she didn't want to scare Nico. That detail that even while falling apart, she was still protecting someone else's child, said more about who Lena Moreau was than any words could. Dominic didn't touch her. He didn't move closer. He sat there and let her feel the full weight of it. Because she'd earned the right to feel it without anyone trying to manage it for her. When the wave passed, he said one thing. "No one will hurt you in this house again." That's not a promise. That's a fact. Nico, sensing something, climbed into Lena's lap and put his small hand on her wet cheek. "No cry," he said. "No cry, Lena." She held him. She held the only person in that house who had ever loved her, with no conditions, no agenda, no angle. And for the first time in 7 months, she took a breath that didn't hurt. But this story doesn't let anyone rest for long. Because while Dominic was dismantling threats inside his house, the biggest threat was building outside of it. Marco, freshly exiled and burning with rage, went straight to Salvatore Vega. They met at a diner in the Bronx. Vega was eating pasta like he had all the time in the world. "He threw me out," Marco said. "His own brother, over a nanny." Vega smiled. "Not just a nanny. That's what makes this beautiful. Did your brother ever tell you who that girl's father was?" Marco stared. "What are you talking about?" "Lena Moreau. Born Lena Devereaux. Her father was Alain Devereaux, the man your father put in the ground 20 years ago. The hit that built your family's empire. The job that gave the Castellanos the docks, the routes, everything. Your brother's precious nanny is the daughter of the man your family murdered to get where you are." Marco went very still. Then he started to laugh. "Does she know?" "No, and neither does your brother. But imagine what it does to Dominic when he finds out. Imagine the guilt, the confusion, the paralysis. He won't be able to think straight for weeks. And that's all the time I need." Vega wanted Marco to leak it. No name attached. Anonymous source. An envelope with a birth certificate, sealed adoption records, and a photograph the same group photo from the East Wing study, with one face circled. Alain Devereaux. Lena's father. The envelope arrived at the Castellano estate 3 days later. Dominic held those documents in his hands and felt the ground shift beneath him. He told Eddie to verify everything. Birth records, adoption files, DNA if he could get it. 48 hours later, Eddie confirmed it all. "It's real," Eddie said. Lena Moreau was born Lena Devereaux. Her father was Alain Devereaux. Your father ordered the hit in 2005. The girl was orphaned at 3, placed with a distant relative named Rose Moreau Nana Rose. Rose changed the girl's name and sealed the records. She's been hiding her in plain sight for 20 years. And Lena doesn't know, Dominic said, has never known. She thinks she's an orphan from nobody. Dominic walked to the window. Lena was in the garden, pushing Nico on a swing, laughing about something. The afternoon sun was behind her. And she looked like a person who had no idea she was living inside her own father's grave. The woman he was falling in love with was the daughter of the man his father killed to build everything Dominic now controlled. The blood debt was real. It was alive. It was growing inside her. And the worst part, the part that kept Dominic awake for 3 straight nights, was that she didn't know. She didn't know that every morning she woke up in that house, she was waking up inside the monument to her own father's murder. Dominic had to decide what kind of man he was going to be. He needed time to think. He didn't get it. In the days before everything collapsed, something quiet and real happened between Dominic and Lena. Late one night, they were both in the kitchen. The staff had gone. The house was dark except for the light over the stove. Lena was making tea. Dominic appeared, and for the first time, they talked like 2 people instead of a boss and an employee. He asked where she grew up. She told him about Bridgeport, the small apartment, Nana Rose working at a laundromat until she was 72, never buying herself anything nice, putting every dollar toward keeping Lena fed and the lights on. He asked about her parents. She went quiet. "I don't know," she said. "Nana never told me. I stopped asking when I was 12 because every time I did, she'd get this look on her face like the question hurt her more than it hurt me. So I just stopped." Dominic held his mug and said nothing. He was sitting across from the daughter of the man his father murdered, and she was telling him, without knowing it, that the absence of her father had shaped her entire life. She asked about Nico's mother. He told her the truth she left when Nico was 3 months old. Couldn't handle the life. "And Vivienne?" Lena asked. "Was she built for it?" "Vivienne was built for the money," Dominic said. "She wasn't built for the boy." He looked at Lena. "You're built for the boy." It wasn't a love confession. It was something harder to fake recognition. He saw her, not as the help, not as a problem to solve, as a person. And Lena, who had spent her entire life being invisible, felt it land somewhere deep. Lena visited Nana Rose. The hospital bills were covered now. Dominic had taken care of them without telling her, and she'd found out from a confused billing clerk. She didn't know how to feel about it. She sat beside Rose, held her hand, and talked. "Something's happening, Nana. I'm scared, and I'm hopeful. Is that crazy? After everything, I feel like something good might actually be growing here, and I don't trust it because nothing good has ever lasted for me." She placed Rose's hand on her belly. "It's a girl, Nana. I'm going to name her after you." "Nana." Rose's heart monitor showed a small spike. The nurse glanced at it. Lena didn't notice. But somewhere behind those closed eyes, behind 9 months of silence, Rose Moreau was fighting her way back. Then everything caught fire. Eddie intercepted a coded message. Marco had sold them out completely safe house locations, shipping routes, security protocols, rotation schedules. Every piece of the Castellano operation laid bare for Salvatore Vega. The betrayal was total. "When did it start?" Dominic asked. "The night you kicked him out. He's been feeding Vega for 3 weeks. Dom, there's something else." Lena had a doctor's appointment this afternoon. The security detail checked in at 2. They haven't responded since. Dominic went cold. Not angry. Cold. The kind of cold that precedes the most dangerous version of a man. "Call them." "I've been calling." No answer. Dominic was already moving. The strategist, the patient leader, the man who never reacted without thinking, gone. In his place was something simpler and more terrifying. A father and a man in love. And both of those people had just been told that the woman carrying his daughter was missing. 2 SUVs had boxed in Lena's car outside the doctor's office. The security detail was overwhelmed in seconds, outnumbered and outgunned. Lena was pulled from the car, clutching Nico, screaming, "Don't touch him! Whatever you want, don't touch him!" They took both of them. The SUVs disappeared into traffic, headed for an abandoned cannery in Bridgeport that Vega had been using as an off-books meeting point for years. Vega didn't take Lena because she was valuable to him. He took her because she was valuable to Dominic. And in that world, the fastest way to destroy a powerful man isn't to attack him. It's to take the thing he can't afford to lose. Now we're back where this story started. The warehouse. The dripping water. The single light bulb. Lena on the floor with Nico. Vega in his folding chair, smiling. But this time, the audience knows everything. They know who Lena is. They know what she's survived. They know whose child she's carrying and whose child she's protecting. And when Vega tells her that her father died in a place just like this, it hits different, because now they understand what he means. Vega told her the truth about her bloodline, her real name, her father. The hit, the docs, all of it. Your father was Alain Devereaux, Vega said. A good man, smart. Ran the Bridgeport docks for 15 years. Then Dominic's father decided he wanted those docks, so he had your father killed. Right here, actually. Same building, back room, the one with the drain in the floor. Lena was shaking. But she was also thinking, processing. Her father, Devereaux, the Castellanos, the house she'd been living in, the man whose child she was carrying, the photograph in the East Wing that made her stomach tighten for reasons she couldn't explain. Vega leaned forward. Dominic will trade his empire to get you back. And if he doesn't, well, history doesn't just rhyme. Sometimes it repeats. Lena looked down at Nico. She looked at her belly. And something changed in her face. Fear was still there. But underneath it, something harder was forming. You don't know Dominic at all, she said. He's not going to negotiate with you. He's going to come through that door. And if you're smart, you won't be here when he does. Vega studied her for a long moment and then smiled. You really are Elaine's daughter. If this story has you on the edge of your seat right now, hit that like button. We're in the final stretch, and what happens next is the moment everything this story has been building toward pays off. Dominic arrived at the cannery with Eddie and a 12-man tactical team. Eddie had tracked the SUVs through traffic cameras and a network of informants who understood that when Dominic Castellano asked for something, the word no was not a safe option. The operation was fast, brutal, and precise. Flash grenades, breaching charges. Vega's men were professionals, but Dominic's people were better and angrier. And anger has a way of making good men fight like they have nothing left to lose. Dominic moved through that building like something inevitable, room by room, door by door. He wasn't giving orders anymore. He was just moving. He found Marco first. Marco was in a side room, gun in his hand, shaking. He looked like a man who'd finally realized that the game he'd been playing was real and the stakes were measured in bodies, not money. She's a Devereaux, Dom, Marco said. She's the enemy. Dad's dead. And so is everything he built if this is what it turns us into. I was your brother, Marco said. I was supposed to matter. You did matter. You just couldn't see it past your own reflection. 3 gunshots from the corridor. Vega's retreating men saw Marco through the doorway, a Castellano who knew too much and couldn't be trusted. To them, he was a loose end. They cut it. Marco fell. His eyes went wide, surprised, like he'd honestly believed he could betray everyone and still walk away clean. Dominic knelt beside him and held his brother's hand while his brother died. It took 12 seconds. 12 seconds for a lifetime of jealousy, resentment, and wasted potential to drain out of a man who never understood that the seat he wanted at the table was never going to make him feel like enough. Dominic found Lena in the back room. She was on the floor, Nico wrapped in her arms, her body curled around him like armor. She was whispering a story to him, the same one about the rabbit and the garden from the very first night she put him to bed. Lena. She looked up. Her face crumbled. He knelt beside her and wrapped his arms around both of them. Nico grabbed Dominic's neck and held on. Lena pressed her face into his chest and let go of the breath she'd been holding since the moment those SUVs boxed her in. Then she gasped. Pain. Sharp, sudden, undeniable. Her water broke. The stress had sent her into labor 5 weeks early. Dominic carried her out of that building. Eddie had a car waiting, sirens in the distance. And somewhere in the dark behind them, the cannery where Alain Devereaux had died 20 years ago sat empty and bloody again, like it had been waiting. The hospital was chaos and calm at the same time. Doctors moved fast. Lena was 5 weeks early. There were risks. Dominic paced the hallway with Nico asleep on his shoulder. Eddie stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching the doors like something might come through them. And for 14 hours the most powerful man on the East Coast was reduced to the most ordinary kind of fear. A man waiting to hear if the woman he loved and the baby she was carrying were going to be okay. When the nurse came out smiling, Dominic nearly collapsed with relief. He walked into the room. Lena was exhausted, pale, and alive. In her arms was a tiny girl early, small, but breathing, fighting, like her mother. "She's okay," Lena said. "She's small, but she's okay." "What's her name?" "Rosalie, after my grandmother, the woman who gave up everything to keep me safe." Dominic touched Rosalie's hand. She wrapped her entire fist around his finger and didn't let go. Eddie brought Nico in. The boy looked at the baby with enormous eyes, reached out, touched her foot, and said the word that had become his answer to everything good: mine. And for the first time in this entire story, everyone in the room laughed. Real laughter. The kind that has no pain underneath it. A week later, Dominic told Lena the truth. All of it. He sat beside her hospital bed with a folder he'd been carrying for days, and he laid it open. He told her about Alain Devereaux, the hit ordered by Don Castellano Sr., the 3-year-old girl who was smuggled out by a woman named Rose, the name change, the sealed records, 20 years of hiding. Lena listened without interrupting. Her face moved through confusion, disbelief, anger, grief, every stage of a loss she didn't know she'd been carrying her entire life. "Your family killed my father," she said. "My father ordered it." "Yes. And Nana Rose knew. This whole time. She kept you alive. By keeping you hidden. Every choice she made was to protect you." Lena looked at the monitor showing Rosalie's heartbeat in the NICU. "Vega told me," she said quietly. "In the warehouse. He told me my real name. I didn't believe him at first. But when you walked into that room I saw your face. And I knew. You already knew. I found out a week before they took you. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. I should have told you immediately. I was wrong to wait." "Yes," she said. "You were." Silence. The monitor beeped. Rosalie stirred. "I spent my whole life not knowing where I came from," Lena said. "Not knowing why Nana cried on my birthday. Not knowing why she'd freeze sometimes when certain songs played. Now I know. My father was murdered. By your father. And I'm lying in a hospital bed holding your daughter." Dominic leaned forward. "If you want to leave, I won't stop you. You'll have everything you need. Money, a home, security, whatever you want. Rosalie will know her father, but I won't hold you here. Not after everything that's been done to you by people with my name." Lena looked at him for a long time. She saw the guilt. She saw the fear. And she saw something his father never had. The willingness to let her walk away. "I'm not going to let where I came from decide where I end up," she said. "I've been doing that my whole life, letting things I didn't know control the things I could choose. I'm done." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm staying. Not as the nanny, not as a secret, not because I have no options, because for the first time in my life, I do have options, and I'm choosing this. I'm choosing Nico. I'm choosing Rosalie. And I'm choosing you, not the name, not the empire, not the money. You." 3 weeks later, Lena walked into room 412 at Bridgeport General, carrying a baby and holding a toddler's hand. She sat in the same plastic chair she'd sat in 100 times before. She placed Rosalie in the crook of her arm and started talking to Rose the way she always did, like Rose could hear every word. She told her about the garden and the way Nico said mine, about everything, and the way Rosalie slept with her fist against her cheek. And then Nana Rose's hand moved, a twitch, then a squeeze. Then her fingers tightened around Lena's, with the kind of desperate grip that comes from someone who's been trying to surface for a very long time. Lena gasped. "Nana?" Rose's eyes opened. Slowly, like coming up from deep water, she blinked. She turned her head. She saw her granddaughter. "Baby girl." Lena was sobbing. She lifted Rosalie so Rose could see. "Nana, this is Rosalie, your great-granddaughter." Rose's eyes filled with tears. She reached out one trembling hand and touched the baby's face. "You found your family," Rose whispered. "I did, Nana, I did." Then Rose looked past Lena. Dominic was standing in the doorway. He'd been there the whole time, not wanting to intrude. Rose studied his face for a long time. She recognized something in those features. Maybe his father, maybe just the weight of the name. Her expression shifted through fear, anger, grief, and then something else. She saw how he was looking at Lena. She saw how Nico leaned against his leg. She saw the way her granddaughter breathed easier with him in the room, and Rose nodded. One slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't forgiveness. Some things are too big for forgiveness, and Rose Moreau had spent 20 years running from this family and everything it represented. But it was acceptance. It was a woman who dedicated her life to protecting Lena, deciding that maybe, after everything, her granddaughter had found a place to stop running too. Dominic nodded back. He understood what it meant. He understood what it cost her. The garden of the Castellano estate. Late afternoon. The kind of golden light that makes everything look like a memory, even while it's happening. Lena sat on the same bench where she'd first held Nico almost a year ago. Rosalie was asleep in a bassinet beside her. Nico was chasing a butterfly in the grass, laughing at nothing the way only children can. Dominic walked across the lawn and sat beside her. He took her hand. She let him. "I've built empires," he said quietly. "I've destroyed enemies. But you're the only thing I've ever wanted to be worthy of." Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then be worthy of it," she said. "Every day, not because of where we came from, because of where we're going." She walked into that house with nothing but a name that wasn't hers and a debt she couldn't pay. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know who her father was. She didn't know that the man who hired her with 2 words was the son of the man who destroyed her family before she could remember. She didn't know any of it, but she survived all of it. The cruelty, the silence, the lies, the violence, the blood debt that was never hers to pay. And when the truth came, all of it, every ugly, bloody piece, she didn't run. She chose the boy who called her Mama. She chose the girl she named after the woman who saved her. She chose the man who was willing to let her go. And she chose herself. For the first time in her life, Lena Devereaux chose herself. And that made all the difference. If this story moved you, smash that like button and leave a comment telling me which part hit you the hardest. Subscribe if you haven't already. I've got more stories like this coming that you don't want to miss. I'll see you in the next one.